A lot of the blame goes to Jason Klaczynski on this one. He is still very active in the vintage metagames. He plays a lot on TCG1.net. So he's also a really good source for updated gameplay within those metagames. Here lately he has been playing around with Kangaskhan, and it really got me interested in Kanga decks. Seeing how this card can be used in what is essentially a metagame that's been developing over the past 25 years. It's not just your Wigglytuff and Haymaker and Rain Dance. It's the response to those decks, and then the response to the response, and then the response to that, until we get to the point where Lickitung and Kangaskhan have become the latest responses, along with a lot of other cards that just didn't see play in earlier iterations of this same metagame. Kangaskhan has always been a solid card. It resists Psychic, so it's helpful against Mewtwo, Alakazam, Mr. Mime, and it's also got 90 HP. It's one of those big normals that can fit right in with any sponge deck. It's a great Pokemon to start the game with because Fetch is a great 1 energy utility attack, and if Kangaskhan hangs around for late game, Comet Punch can actually deal quite a bit of damage if you're hitting those coin flips. Previously, it had been overlooked because of its weakness to Hitmonchan, but also because its utility as a sponge normal type was just overshadowed by Chansey, or Lickitung's ability to deal some damage and cause disruption for 1 energy in a format where drawing cards is actually extremely easy to do thanks to Bill and Professor Oak, and so Fetch isn't as meaningful in the base set era as it would become in later formats. So then why are we talking about Kangaskhan now? Well, it's because it has a pretty fun combo with another overlooked Pokemon from the base set era, Dragonite. So yeah, this deck's got a lot of normal types in it. Let's get into the build. So the idea behind this deck is very similar to the Smelly Dragons build I already did for the Rocket playlist, so you can go check that out for a little more information. But this time it's just more Kangaskhan focused instead of Dark Gloom. Not only are you using Dragonite's power to get your active Pokemon out of some special conditions, but you're also getting around Kangaskhan's high retreat cost, and Lickitung's for that matter, just so you can use them to their maximal potential. You remove one of the biggest drawbacks to either one of those cards. So it's going to be a 3-3-3 line of Dragonite. You don't really need Pokemon Breeder here, as Dragonair and Dragonite are both pretty bulky in their own right, so you don't have to worry about those knockouts, and they're not going to be heavy targets early game anyway. But the power I've been talking about is Dragonite's Step-In power, where if Dragonite is on your bench during your turn, you can move it into the active position. It's like a free switch. And of course with Kangaskhan, if you start the game with it, you're going to be attaching an energy and using Fetch as many times as you need to. It's just a great utility card. Pokemon is not an exception in the TCG world in that draw power is raw power. This deck does pack double colorless energy, so late game you can start getting off some of those Comet Punches for heavier damage, but DCEs are really just energy removal bait. Instead, you're going to be using Dragonite to step in when you want to swap out from a Kangaskhan, get a Lickitung into the active position, because Tongue Wrap is just an amazing attack. It can really mess up your opponent's board. And in order to streamline the Dragonite, I'm also running a 2-2 line of Dodrio so that Dragonite does not have a retreat cost. You can step in, get the Kangaskhan or the Lickitung to safety, heal off any special conditions, and then free retreat that Dragonite back to the bench to put out a refreshed or new Pokemon into the active position. And in doing so, you're really utilizing Dragonite in the same way that you would with Scyther, but even better, because its power allows it to assert itself into the active position before it free retreats. It has no weakness, and like Scyther, resists fighting. Now, because of the current metagame where normal is the new metagame, Hitmonchan gets to have a little bit of a comeback, plus Hitmonchan's weakness is covered by Kangaskhan and Lickitung, so it actually makes a pretty good partner. Alternatively, you could just replace the Hitmonchans with any other Haymaker Pokemon you like, stick into Electabuzz, 2 promo Mewtwo's, whatever. And 21 Pokemon is quite a lot for a base fossil deck, but that's part of really what makes this deck work, is that Kangaskhan is its own draw power, meaning that you don't have to rely on Bill and Professor Oak as much. you don't really want to discard your hand more than once with this deck, because a lot of times you have Pokemon in your hand that you're going to need later on, which is why there's 3 copies of Pokemon Trader in here. You're going to have so many Pokemon in hand that Trader is going to get you whatever you need for that turn, and you'll be moving things around a lot on your side of the field, which keeps your opponent on their toes. Another way to do that is by hitting them with Gust. Got 3 copies of Gust in here just so you can get those easy knockouts when you are ready to just hit hard, or if you're wanting to strand something in the active position and then pull out your own Lickitung, or if your opponent has something that is weak to Hitmonchan and you've got it fully powered up, you've got some options. Got 2 copies of Mr. Fuji in here because so often you will have Kangaskhan's and Lickitungs on your bench that have served their purpose as damage sponges. They have tons of damage counters on them. You can just Fuji them right back into your deck. I prefer a couple of Fujis to Pokemon Center, but you're completely valid in running Pokemon Center in this deck as well, because Dragonite's rarely going to have any energy on it. So you can use it as a sponge and heal off without having to discard. Kangaskhan and Lickitung most of the time are only going to have 1 energy attached to them unless it's mid or late game when you are dropping those double colorless. A couple copies of Last to help with those energy removals if you do find yourself in a place where you want to start attaching them, you want to get off some big attacks, but you're worried that your opponent has been holding them in hand waiting for that exact moment. And then a couple copies of Item Finder, just recycled stuff, and 3 copies of Energy Retrieval, just because energy removal is everywhere, and as you're getting your basic energies discarded, hopefully, and getting them out of your opponent's way, you're able to retrieve some of them. This deck has plenty of fighting energy in it because you are going to be attaching so many one-offs, not just to Lickitung and Kangaskhan, but also to Hitmonchan as needed. You can even drop some on Dodrio to get off a Rage, all depending on the situation, but you do want to try to get those fighting energy discarded earlier mid-game, and that works really well since you do have so many 1 energy attackers, and that leaves room for late game. You can drop the DCEs without too much worry. As I mentioned earlier, Pokemon Center is another great addition to this deck, since most Pokemon that are going to be sponging up damage will only have 1 or 0 energy attached to them. And I do want to mention that this deck gets even better if you are including the Rocket set, if you're playing base Rocket. So I'm going to try to include it in that playlist as well, because really the only change you need to make is adding in Nightly Garbage Run. But it also gives you access to Potion Energy and Full Heal Energy, which are great for normal type decks. But Dragonite's Step in Power becomes way more handy when you are dealing with a lot of special conditions. When you got a format that is chock full of Drowsy and Dark Gloom, not to mention Dark Vileplume, which is blocking you from using trainers. It's blocking you from your draw power that's coming from Bill and Oak, but Kangaskhan is an amazing backup that lets you still have draw power without having to use trainers. One of the major selling points for Kangaskhan is that Dark Vileplume hates it. Stay tuned to the channel for another Kangaskhan deck coming soon, because I tell you, Klazinski has really given me a new perspective on this card. But also let me know down in the comments what other decks you would like to see featured on the channel, or any vintage Pokemon topic that you'd like to see me tackle. I thank you for popping in and watching some videos. I'll see you at the next one. Bye!